Hey there, I'm Kim. Welcome to the Executive Assistant Playbook. I'm so glad you're here. So, if you are in an administrative support role, then you know that there's a lot of different ways that you can support someone. Or if you're looking to get into this type of career, you've likely seen a bunch of different job descriptions that say different things like executive assistant, administrative assistant, personal assistant, and you're like, what in the world? Like, a lot of these job descriptions have similarities, but then they don't, and I don't really understand, what's going on here. So I want to take a few minutes, to discuss the similarities between them and the differences to help you if you're looking to make a career move or you're just wanting to get into this type of work and looking for the best fit for you. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's start with similarities. We're really going to focus on executive assistant, administrative assistant, and personal assistant in these. I'm not going to go really deep into like the different levels of each. We will talk about the specific skill sets that are predominant or what you might run into in those type of roles, but in terms of the different career levels of each one, we won't get into that here today because that's generally very specific to the company that you're applying for. So let's talk about similarities. So in each role, you're going to encounter duties like calendar management, scheduling appointments, and coordinating meetings. Like that is standard across the board. You're also going to encounter travel arrangements, and that is going to be dependent on the scope of the role that you support or the needs of the business that you work for. For instance, you're likely to encounter more travel management the higher up you go in that management level in terms of who you're supporting, or if you work for a larger company that has a bigger footprint. So for instance, when I worked for smaller US-based companies, there just wasn't a whole lot of need for travel for certain executives. And if there was a need for travel, then it would, for the most part, just be US-based and pretty standard. But as I moved on to a global company that had a much larger footprint, I ran into things like having to plan their travel to like a different country, and then also building out their schedule and making sure that they had a support person that was really kind of like the liaison that I would go through to make sure everything made sense, that they had a ride from the airport to the office, that they were able to get into their hotel to freshen up before they had to go into the office. There is arguably a whole lot more that goes into global travel, and especially when you're supporting higher level executives, there might be higher level expectations in terms of accommodations and reservations and things like that. So it's really just dependent on who you support and where they need to go. But you're going to likely run across that no matter what job you're doing. You're also going to be responsible for managing incoming and outgoing calls, emails, and other correspondence, and has a different level, again, dependent on who you support and what exactly you do or what your company does. But that is an important part of that because you are a gatekeeper. No matter what your role is, you're always serving as some sort of gatekeeper. So to piggyback off of that, you really need to have excellent communication skills. So if that is something you feel like you could grow in, then I would really encourage you to look up free courses on LinkedIn or something like that to help you grow within those skill sets, because that is incredibly important, especially the higher up you go. But we'll get into that. So, but you will be responsible for communicating with a lot of people regardless. So that could be clients, vendors, other employees. So you want to make sure your communication skills are on point. All roles also serve a purpose in event planning and team meeting coordination. It's, depending, again, on what you do, it could be different across the board. I've done it all sorts of ways, but you're going to have those responsibilities as well. Keeping everyone organized, keeping files and records. So in terms of like some skill sets that are common between all of them, you really do need to be organized. Detail oriented, anticipate the needs of who you're supporting and even the teams that you support, and the ability to multitask effectively. I like to say that there are some days that it feels like you're spinning a bunch of plates and the plates are on fire, and you're going to need to be able to keep your cool with that. It can be very stressful when you're managing a bunch of stuff for several different people and just trying to keep everyone on task. So, if that is something that doesn't interest you, please heed my warning. This is not the career for you. If you don't like to do those things, or you don't want to grow yourself in that particular way. So let's dive a little bit deeper into like the different types of roles. We're going to start with the executive assistant. So you are, as an executive assistant, going to be supporting likely someone who is higher up in the company that has, like a vice president title, senior vice president, a C-suite level title, so on and so forth. Your responsibilities will be dependent on who that is. The higher up you go, the more responsibilities you tend to have, because there's more to manage there. In terms of communication, you may find yourself responsible for that executive or multiple executives' inbox to, organize, like, what do they need to see, what do they not need to see, where can I respond for them, who needs a response quickly. You're just going to be prioritizing their communication that way often and keeping track of that. So your communication skills really, really do need to be on point, especially if you're executive, if you have built enough trust with your executive to be able to communicate for them in certain aspects. And so, also probably going to be conducting research, preparing reports, presentations. I've done a lot of that where, even if it was just to get my executive started building something out, and then they could, add in pieces here and there, or if they needed to know something, I would go and, look it up and prepare a presentation for them, or I've even prepared presentations for, the entire executive suite to view. So that is like a skill set that you're going to want to develop as well if you haven't already. I am a very great Google and can find information pretty quickly just over the years of having to do it, and then also building effective presentations. Which, if you're interested, we can talk about that in a future course as well. You just have to let me know in the comments that that's something that you would want help with. So, moving on, you're going to be managing the executive's expenses and preparing expense reports, financial reports, pretty much all business related, but if they need to be reimbursed for anything, you'll be handling that as well. I am a stickler for a good expense report, so we can also do that in a different session of how I have mastered the expense report. And there's a ton of different programs and stuff that you could potentially be using, but we can also talk about that in a future session. Moving on to, event planning. Typically the executive assistant is going to have the biggest hand in event planning. It depends on what kind of support team you have available, but as an executive assistant, I have led more events than in any other type of role. I loved it. It was amazing for me. If that's not something you love to do, you can absolutely say, hey, I don't excel in that, but just know that you're going to run into that probably more often than not, unless your company has a full-fledged event team. But you're still going to be, a part of that, because, your executive will probably need to be involved one way or the other. So you will always have some sort of hand in it. You're going to be acting as a liaison between the executive and other departments or stakeholders within the organization or outside the organization. I always used to say that one of my bosses, the one that I've spent the most time with, he's 6'5", I'm 5'3", and so I would always say, it's like him or like tiny him, meaning me. And people would generally like get the joke too, like, was that big boss or little boss? There's a lot of times where you're just going to have to run interference and, really be that tiny executive, like that tiny CEO or mini CEO, however you want to say it. So you really will find yourself often in a position having to represent yourself as if you are the executive, because you are representing an executive of your company. So you'll run into that a lot more as an executive assistant. You're also playing a critical role in ensuring that the executive can focus on their core responsibilities and make the most effective use of their time. You're going to have to be, again, highly organized, really detail oriented, and really skilled in communication and multitasking in order to accomplish that effectively. A couple more things about the executive assistant. You are often going to be, there's a lot of like day-to-day tactical stuff that you'll be doing, going back to like scheduling and stuff like that, but you're also going to have to strategically manage out, I like to say, about 30 days at a time in Other supportive roles, we'll get into this, it's a little bit more tactical in other supportive roles, but as an executive assistant, you really need to be able to strategically think about all that have to be done, that your executive has to do, and how you're going to fill in that time appropriately based on their priorities and what needs to be done. So, that being said, typically more experienced assistants are going to be hired in these type of roles just due to the nature of the work. There's also a high level of confidentiality too. So going to be plenty of times where you just won't be able to tell people about your work and what you do because there's a lot of sensitive stuff that comes across an executive's desk. And you'll probably run into that more working higher up with executives than in other roles. And so they're going to be looking for a very mature, very poised, even-keeled type person to support them, because it does take a lot to support a higher level executive. So in a nutshell, that's the executive assistant. Also, I will say quickly that executive assistants are typically a little bit higher paid than some others. That's not, that is not like always true. But, the more experience you have, the higher up you go. Generally speaking, the higher pay you're going to get. So I wouldn't just straight up apply for an executive assistant job just for the hopes of having higher pay. Like, you really do need to hear me when I say it's hard work, and there's other jobs that pay really well too. So if none of this interests you, please go do something else, otherwise you will be miserable. So the administrative assistant, you're gonna be supporting, like I said before, you're going to be doing a lot more tactical stuff, like day-to-day stuff and clerical things, and you're going to be supporting probably an individual or a few, but it's going to be a little bit lower level, generally speaking, and, you may be responsible for, also supporting an entire department or an organization. So that's not to say you would be scheduling for everyone. Like, please do not make yourself do that. But you will have just a little bit more hands-on with, an entire department probably. So, and again, the role varies depending on the organization and what they need, but it is going to be more tactical, like day-to-day stuff. You may also be in a position where you are doing a dual role, like the way that I started with that global company of where you're a receptionist and an administrative assistant, where you serve both purposes. So you could be greeting and assisting visitors and clients. You could be performing data entry and database management. And so taking on those things that really kind of offload some of that like administrative heavy lifting off of, the manager person that you support or the team that you support. Managing mail and packages is pretty standard. Managing office supplies and inventory is also pretty standard, unless you have like a facilities department that does that for you. You'll be assisting with event planning and coordination as well. You may not have very large events put on your plate. So if you want to grow in that particular area, you may seek out like a different role or really even just express your interest that that's something that you want to do in the future. And so, but just know that you may not have very large events put on your plate. You may be tasked with stepping in to either support the executive assistant planning it or the marketing or event planning team planning it. You're going to be providing more general administrative support as needed, and it's just really dependent on what everyone has going on. Saying all of that, these are generally hired as like entry level, and they don't require as much experience to get started. So if you were looking to get into administrative work, I would focus heavily on looking for administrative assistant titles as you apply and looking at the requirements for those. So, different people will request different things based on what they think will benefit their team, but you're often going to find that the administrative roles don't require any sort of like special degree, or they require less experience. So just know that going in. That also means you may be in like an entry-level mid-range of pay. You're not always going to find a super high salary when you're going in as an administrative assistant. Great news is that there's plenty of room for growth there as well. So moving on to personal assistants. So they are going to be doing a lot of the administrative work that you would see in the first two, but they're also going to be doing personal work as well. And it could be, you're supporting an executive that, needs their calendar taken care of, but also needs to make sure that their dry cleaning gets picked up. You know, here in Nashville specifically, we do have a lot of like celebrities and artist managers and things like that that do have personal assistants. Dependent on who you're supporting in roles like that is, you know, really what kind of determines like your pay and what you're doing day to day. There are plenty that really do just handle personal reservations, going to pick up the dry cleaning, maybe doing some grocery shopping, maybe picking up, you know, the kids, getting them to and from school, just really providing that personal level of support. Like, you know, the family just, or the person just can't always step in and do. So, you know, it's that plus some more administrative tasks. Like, you're still a gatekeeper for that person. People who want to get to them are still going to be routed to you for the most part, but you're not going to be necessarily affecting the day-to-day of like a particular business. It's really more about impacting someone's personal life so that they can focus on their. So here in Nashville, if you're supporting a celebrity or anywhere else that has celebrities, you're probably going to be paid pretty well, but you also probably will be required to be available 24/7. So, you know, I mean, that's not something I'm into, but that might be something where you're in a season in your life where you can offer that, you know, where you're really into music or you're really into the arts of some sort and you think that it can help you grow in your career. And so it's worth it to you to make that sacrifice. For me, it's not. And so, and I also decided that, you know, personally, I wanted to grow myself by helping people grow their businesses. I did not see how helping on the personal side of things would help grow me personally. You know, and that's not to knock any like personal assistant out there. I think you guys are amazing and necessary. But for me, in terms of, you know, if I am spending my valuable limited time on supporting someone, then I want to make sure I'm getting as much out of it as I possibly can. So that's just where I landed. That's not where everyone else is going to land. So it's just those are the kind of things that you need to think about if you're going to go into careers like this. But with a personal assistant, you're probably going to have to work long hours. Like I said, you know, a lot of them want you available 24/7. It can be very high pressure or not. You know, if you, depending on who you're supporting, you're probably going to have to sign a non-disclosure agreement because you're going to have access to someone's personal life. And let's say you're supporting someone who a lot of people want to have access to, and you're going to have all of this information that could be very damaging to them and to their family. And so they are going to seek out every possible way to protect themselves and their families and their futures. So just know that going in, that, you know, if you sign that NDA and you break it, there could be legal repercussions for you. So it can be a very serious situation. So, you know, and this can be an entry-level position, or it can require a lot more experience. So just know that going in, that, you know, it's likely not going to require you to have a degree to get this type of role, but you likely might find this to be more of an entry-level role. If you want to do personal assisting for someone of a higher level, you are really going to have to build out your resume and prove yourself that you can handle the confidentiality of it, that you are a trustworthy person, and all of those things before a lot of those people will really depend on you. So I hope that is helpful to you. Like I said, you know, there's a lot of different skill sets that we'll go into, and if there's anything that you're really struggling with or you want to know more about, just pop it in the comments and I can do a video on it, no problem. And I definitely want to give you guys the information that you need, that you find most helpful. Always happy to upload videos that, you know, I would find helpful in my career, but also this forum is for you. So yeah, hope that was helpful, and like and subscribe for access to more videos, and I will see you next time.